She never imagined her civil rights speech would end with scissors at her scalp. Layla Johnson stood frozen in the school hallway, tears streaming down her face as Officer Daniels' cold fingers gripped her hair. The resource officer had finally snapped after months of targeting students who dared to speak up. "Welcome to TO Stories, where truth hits harder than fiction," echoed through Layla's mind as she felt the first cruel snip. Her heart raced, shame burning through her chest as classmates watched in horror. Some recorded with trembling hands. Others turned away. But no one stepped forward to help the FBI assistant director's daughter. The metallic sound of scissors slicing through her curls matched her racing pulse. Each lock that fell represented years of pride, of identity, of everything her father had taught her about standing tall. But Officer Daniels had no idea who he was really messing with. And karma was about to come down hard. If only he'd known who her father was. If only he'd stopped to think. But power corrupts. And in the next 5 minutes, Officer Daniels would learn exactly what happens when you choose the wrong target for your hatred. Malcolm Johnson slammed his FBI badge on Principal Carter's desk, his controlled fury filling the room. The security footage playing on the laptop showed every excruciating second of what Officer Daniels had done to his daughter. "Explain to me," Malcolm said, his voice dangerously quiet, "why a school resource officer felt empowered to assault my daughter." Carter squirmed, his collar suddenly too tight. There were prior incidents. Layla's speech about systemic racism was provocative. Provocative? Malcolm leaned forward. "My daughter exercises her First Amendment rights, and your solution is to let an officer physically assault her." Meanwhile, down the hall, Layla sat in the counselor's office, touching the jagged remains of her once beautiful curls. Her best friend, Zoe, pressed a warm cup of tea into her trembling hands. "You should have seen his face," Layla whispered, "like he was enjoying it. Like cutting my hair made him feel powerful." Zoe squeezed her shoulder. "He's done this kind of thing before. Remember Jasmine last semester? The random locker searches that only seemed to target certain students?" Layla's hands tightened around the cup. Everyone knew. The teachers, the administration, they all knew and did nothing. In the hallway, students gathered in clusters, phones out, sharing the videos they'd taken. Some looked ashamed for not intervening. Others relieved it hadn't been them. But the whispers grew louder as more FBI agents arrived, their presence sending ripples through the school's carefully maintained facade of order. Officer Daniels paced in the security office, his swagger replaced by nervous energy. When the door opened, he straightened, expecting Principal Carter with some face-saving solution. Instead, 2 FBI agents stepped in. Officer Derek Daniels, one announced, "You're under investigation for civil rights violations, assault on a minor, and abuse of power under color of law." The color drained from Daniels' face. "You don't understand. That girl was undermining everything we've built here. Someone had to put her in her place." "Her place?" The second agent's voice dripped with disgust. "And where exactly is that, Officer Daniels?" As they led him out in handcuffs, students lined the halls. The same students who had watched in silence now recorded his walk of shame. Layla stood with Zoe, her chin high despite her tears. "This isn't just about me," she told Zoe. "It's about every student who felt powerless, every voice that was silenced." Principal Carter emerged from his office, Malcolm Johnson following like a storm cloud. The principal's usual authority had crumbled, replaced by the desperate look of a man watching his career implode. "We'll need all disciplinary records," Malcolm stated. "Every complaint, every incident report, especially the ones that never made it into official files." Carter blanched. "Those would be confidential." "Not anymore." Malcolm's phone buzzed. The Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division is very interested in the pattern of behavior at this school. Every teacher who looked the other way, every administrator who buried a complaint, they'll all have to answer for it. Students gathered around Layla, their silence finally breaking. One by one, they began to share their stories, the intimidation, the targeted, random searches, the casual cruelty masked as discipline. "I should have said something sooner," a junior named Marcus admitted. "After what he did to my brother last year." "We all should have," another student added. Layla looked at their faces, guilty, angry, determined. Then say something now, she urged. This only stops if we make it stop. In the days that followed, the story exploded. News vans camped outside the school, reporters clamoring for interviews. But the real story wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet conversations happening in classrooms and cafeterias as students finally felt safe enough to speak their truth. Teachers who had enabled Daniel's behavior found themselves under scrutiny. Some resigned quietly, others faced disciplinary hearings. The school board called emergency meetings, suddenly eager to implement anti-bias training and oversight measures they'd rejected for years. Layla's hair would grow back, but she wasn't the same person who had walked into school that morning. The scared girl in that chair had emerged as someone stronger, someone who understood that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about changing the system that made abuse possible. You know this isn't over, Zoe said one afternoon, watching reporters interview students outside the school. Layla touched her growing curls, remembering the sound of those scissors. Good, she replied, because neither am I. The story spread beyond their town, sparking conversations in schools across the country. Layla's speech, the one that had so threatened Officer Daniels, found a much larger audience than she'd ever imagined. But more importantly, it gave others the courage to stand up, to speak out, to challenge the small daily injustices that added up to systemic failure. Malcolm watched his daughter navigate interviews and advocacy meetings with growing pride. She had transformed trauma into purpose, fear into determination. You know, he told her, this was never just about one bad officer. No, Layla agreed, straightening her shoulders. It was about all of us who let fear keep us silent. And that's what has to change. 6 months later, Layla stood before the school board, her regrown curls framing her face like a crown of resilience. The room was packed with students, parents, and cameras, so different from that lonely moment in the hallway when scissors had stripped away more than just her hair. Officer Daniels will serve time, she began, her voice steady. But this was never about one person's hatred. It was about the silence that protected him, the system that empowered him, the fear that kept us quiet. She paused, scanning the faces before her. Today, our school has new leadership, new policies, and new courage. But most importantly, we have our voices back, and we're never letting them be taken away again. Later, walking through those same halls with Zoe, Layla smiled at a freshman confidently reporting harassment to the new resource officer, a woman who listened with genuine concern. Look what you started, Zoe whispered. No, Layla corrected, touching her curls. Look what we all finished. If this story moved you like it moved us at TO Stories, help us spread more voices of courage. Hit that like button, share this video, and join our journey to 10,000 subscribers. Together, we can turn silence into strength, one story at a time.